Good morning, everybody. My name is Camilla Lerberg, and I'm the CEO of the Fairtrade mark in Denmark. And I'm here to welcome you today to this event. I want to thank you all for joining and taking the time to be a part of this webinar that puts together the spotlight on sustainability in the cocoa industry. I see a lot of familiar faces here and new ones as well, so a warm welcome to everybody. We are all here because the cocoa industry is still facing many challenges. Even after decades of attention from consumers, government, media, schools, and organizations, there's still millions of children working in the cocoa farms in West Africa, children that should be in school instead. It becomes increasingly clear that the cocoa industry is not going to be fixed merely by external pressure or legislation. We have to act within the cocoa industry. All of us present here today, from all nodes of the supply chain, from all ends of the industry, we all have a role to play in creating a more sustainable cocoa industry and more promising future for the cocoa farmers and their families. Good things are happening in terms of consumer awareness and the general increased focus on sustainability. And we must accelerate these changes. We cannot spend another 20 years creating as little impact as we have done for the last 20. I want to highlight the opportunity we are here to make a difference. We know that the Nordics are amongst the markets most susceptible to sustainable products. We know that the Nordic consumers are amongst the most demanding ones when it comes to responsible sourced products. And we often see ourselves in the Nordics as frontrunners on sustainable solutions. So why not showcase what can be done in the business of cocoa if we collaborate across the sector in the Nordics? I hope the event today will spark and initiate a forum in which we are comfortable to discuss all the challenges that we face. I also hope that we can continue this discussion even when it gets difficult, because there are several difficult issues in the business of cocoa, especially the business and issue of price. The DNA of fair trade is the matter of fair prices. A fair price is paramount to ensure that farmers are generating a decent income from their work. If we are not able to secure a decent income for cocoa farmers in Global South, we can forget about fighting climate changes, deforestation, loss of biodiversity, and virtually everything else. Therefore, we must secure decent income to the farmers to create a foundation on which we can build other solutions for other sustainability issues. This means that to mitigate climate changes, to stop deforestation and put an end to child labor, we must first focus on our attention to the core problem here, and that's poverty. We must pay a fair price for our cocoa so cocoa farmers can reach a living standard where they can become active partners in our sustainable agenda. If farmers are not able to learn enough to put clothes on their children, how can we expect them to care about deforestation? If we keep making farmers obstacles for our own sustainability agenda, we are not going to reach our targets. We need to empower and enable those at the very beginning of our supply chains. If we are serious about our own visions for a more sustainable world. I believe that this initiative can be a great place for all of us to discuss the difficult issues, learn from each other, and inspire in each other. We know that other initiatives has been successfully in the past, such as the GISCO in Germany, that we will hear more about in a short while. And I'm excited that this moment has now reached the Nordics as well. So on behalf of the Nordic Fairtrade organizations and the Nordic Ethical Trade Initiatives, I would once again like to welcome you all and hope that in an hour's time, we can all agree that this is about time for a Nordic initiative on sustainable cocoa. And I would like to give the floor to Henrik Lindholm, Executive Director, Ethical Trade Initiative, Sweden. And thank you all and enjoy your time together.
Thanks a lot, Camilla, for that introduction. I thought I'd just give a short introduction to the ideas behind why we have gathered here today to discuss sustainable cocoa supply chains. I myself have been working for many years on human rights in garment and textile sector. And I should be hardened by what I've seen there, but to be honest, the challenges that we face in the cocoa industry are a lot tougher. However, I think in the garment textile industry, as well as in the cocoa industry, we often come under fire for not making any progress at all. I think this is often unfair. We have made progress, but all of us here today, I think we agree that we have not made enough progress. And to reach our goals, it is not just a matter of continuing as usual and waiting for these gradual improvements to eventually make us reach our goals of having sustainable supply chains. We need something new, something different to address this. And I think we can find inspiration in what others are doing and see what has had success in creating the changes we have seen. And since I only have 3 minutes time for this introduction, I'll be as bold as to immediately go on to suggest what is needed. Collaboration and critical mass. The problems we're facing are bigger than our own individual supply chains. By working together, we can learn from each other and work towards clear and measurable goals. By doing so, we can be a part of changes that are bigger than our own individual supply chains. This is also what we've seen in the national initiatives on sustainable cocoa in Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, and France. These initiatives were formed as part of the response to the challenges in the cocoa industry, and often with a focus on how to support living incomes in the cocoa supply chains. They managed to bring together large part of the majority of the industry and the stakeholders in their markets and actually drive the change that is needed. With inspiration from these initiatives, our friends at Fairtrade Norway and Iniatiatives Nordic have started exploring the possibility to have a Nordic initiative on sustainable cocoa, GISCO. In Sweden and Denmark, we quickly liked this idea and started working together to see how we could support this forming. We hope this meeting will inspire us all to work together with these challenges together. And I think this is a brilliant time to do so. The other national initiatives have started to coordinate their work to work more efficiently, again, in the spirit of collaboration and creating the critical mass needed. So now it's really time for us in the Nordic countries to step up and join their work. I look forward to hearing the rest of the speakers today and continuing this discussion with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla and Henrik, for the welcome. My name is Simen, and I'm a senior advisor at Ethical Trade Norway in our food and farming team. And I've been part of the organizing committee for this event today, together with colleagues in the Nordics. And I'll be the moderator for today's event. I'm going to just briefly go through the agenda. We have quite an interesting agenda prepared for today. We will start hearing from John Walker in Fairtrade International, who will set the scene with going into some of the elaborating on the challenges that we see in the cocoa industry as sort of a backdrop for today's webinar. And then at the end of his presentation and at the end of every presentation, there will be a possibility for you to ask questions. And I would like to ask you to use the Q&A function in Zoom to write your questions, and I'll make sure to ask them to the presenters at the end of each presentation. After John, we will hear from Beate Weiskopf, who's the Executive Secretary of the German Initiative on Sustainable Cocoa. The initiative has existed for more than 10 years and has a long history of gathering the actors in the German cocoa sector to work for change. And she will elaborate on the history of the initiative and on some of the achievements that they've had. And then we will hear from Markus Hartmann, who's the Corporate and Government Affairs Lead of Mondelez International in the Nordics. Mondelez has been part of the German initiative on sustainable cocoa and also other European initiatives. So Mondelez knows what it's like to be part of such an initiative. So we'll hear some thoughts from the business perspective of the value it might have to be part of such an initiative. And then we'll try to wrap it up at the end. So do think of questions that you might have for the speakers and write them down in the Q&A section. An initiative for sustainable cocoa is a multi-stakeholder initiative, and we thought it would be interesting to know on an anonymous basis who is present here today. So we've made a poll that I would like to ask you to fill out, just to get an overview of who's here. So there should be a poll on your screen now where you can pick one of the options that you see here, the one that suits you best, so that we get an impression of who the participants are. And while you make your choice, I'll give you a few more seconds. I can just say that invitations have been sent out in the networks of the ethical trading initiatives and the fair trade organizations of the Nordics. So you should all be friends or colleagues of at least one of us. And the multi-stakeholder nature of the initiative is, of course, very important and really a prerequisite to be able to work in this way. Okay, let's see if we can close the poll and see the results. Yes, interesting. So about 50% of the participants come from business, either retailers, chocolate manufacturers, or brands. And the rest is civil society, with about a third of the participants, and then spread out the rest on the last few categories. Thank you for that. That's very useful. Okay. We'll get going with the first speaker on the agenda. That is John Walker from Fairtrade International, who will set the stage and go into some of the challenges in cocoa. John, I'll give the word to you.
Thank you, Simen. I'll just share my screen, so give me a moment, please. Thank you. My name is John Walker, Senior Advisor for Cocoa at Fairtrade International. As was said earlier, today I've been asked to talk about some of the pressing issues in cocoa and how these issues could and are being addressed by companies taking their own responsibility and the power of collective action. I will touch on 4 topics in West African cocoa, where much of the world's cocoa comes from: household income, child and forced labour, gender, deforestation. We'll then look briefly at how some of these challenges are being addressed. This data is from the second Fairtrade Ivorian household. Yeah.
Can you just stop the screen sharing and then start it with sharing the screen instead? Otherwise we can't see. So share screen instead of app.
Can you see it now?
No, I think you're sharing the app instead of the screen.
Same as I did yesterday when we trialed it. And it tells me that I'm sharing my screen.
Okay, then if you can not go into full screen, the presentation view, then we can see it.
Okay. Can you see it now?
We see it, but I'm not sure if we can see the full screen.
Can you see it now?
Yep. Can you try to go to next? Yes, just keep it like that, then it's fine.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I guess this is going to be quite small on your screen now, but this is the smallest text on the screen, and I'll talk you through it. So the data you can see is the second Fairtrade Ivorian household income study. We did our first study collecting household income data in 2016 and 17, and then went back to 16 cooperatives in 2020. Both full studies are available online. We observed increases in Ivorian cocoa farmers' household income, with researchers identifying contributing factors as an increase in yield per hectare, with younger trees as a contributing factor. Some farmers had the safety net of the Fairtrade minimum price, and an increase in the number of farmers diversifying income. However, while the number of households with a living income rose from 6.6%, which is at the far end of this chart, to 14%, those in extreme poverty dropped to from 52% to 39%. So it's good. The number in extreme poverty dropped, the number in householding with a living income increased, but it's still 39% of households in extreme poverty. And a living income, as all of us know, I guess, allows access to decent housing, nutritious diet, clothing, access to education and medical assistance, and money for unexpected events. And these living income is a human right and a precondition to accessing other human rights. With the current decrease in global food security and increase in costs associated with living and farming, there is deep concern for these vulnerable households. In relation to the prevalence of child labour in West Africa, this is well known, as was being said earlier by Camilla. To put it in context, there are 160 million child labourers globally and 112 million in agriculture. US Department of Labour estimated in 2020 1.56 million child labourers in Ghana and CDI in the cocoa sector. Low farmer income and poverty contribute to this, among other factors. The impact of child labour follows the child into adulthood and the next generation. While the scale of forced labour is thought to be lower, it does not reduce the severity of the problem for those individuals involved. And of course, it must be addressed. There is a pressing need for women's role in cocoa production to be formally recognised. The lack of formal recognition hinders women's ability to participate in their farmer organisations, in access to initiatives improving farmers' livelihoods. Yet cocoa farming would be impossible without women. Access to resources needs to be combined with agency, enhancing women's voice, choice, and control over those resources, as well as influencing the systems they live in. In relation to deforestation, what you can see on your screen are 3 images of Côte d'Ivoire showing different periods of time. Where the green is disappearing, you're seeing the reducing forest. Expansion in cocoa production has been combined with prices that don't cover the sustainable cost of production, which in turn impacts soil fertility maintenance. Of course, we have the upcoming and welcome EU regulatory proposal, which will stop the import of cocoa associated with deforestation into the EU after December 2020. However, at this stage, that proposal does not address the root causes of deforestation, one of which is poverty. So amongst all these challenges, amongst these challenging circumstances, there is much that's been done on an individual company basis and increasingly on a collective level in partnership with farmers and their organisations. On farmer income, any company buying cocoa from Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana has since October 2020 been paying the Ghanaian and Ivorian living income differential. This was supposed to be an additional $400 per tonne on top of the market price for cocoa levied by the governments of Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire to boost farmer income, recognising that farmer incomes are just too low. Sadly, those governments recently stated almost all of the targeted benefits the governments hoped to deliver to farmers have been eroded due to falls in the price of Ghanaian and Ivorian cocoa. Yet many companies pay additional premiums on top of the market price and on top of the lid. And in the case of Fairtrade, a Fairtrade premium and a minimum price that acts as a safety net when the market prices drop. All the products in this picture employ some form of combination of the mandatory Fairtrade premium, the mandatory Fairtrade minimum price, and programmatic support on yield and diversification and further top-up payments to assist farmers progressing to a living income. In some cases, these programs have been supported by governments involved in the Initiatives for Sustainable Cocoa, for example, the Belgian government. On gender, there are long-running programs developed by Care International on village saving and loans associations designed to increase women's access to loans that many companies support. Fairtrade's own long-running Ivorian Women's School of Leadership focused on increasing women's agency, supported by the French government and companies, is now expanding to Ghana thanks to support from the Norwegian government. On child labour, many companies, certifiers and civil society come together at the International Cocoa Initiative to work on child labour and to fund their research onto the causes and resolution for child labour. The picture you see is a risk mapping process at a Ghanaian cooperative, and the Finnish government has assisted in supporting this work. On deforestation, many companies come together under the Cocoa and Forests Initiative, working collaboratively with the governments of Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire and implementing work on deforestation. At Fairtrade, we have seen companies such as Chocolate Halber and Now Divine work with Ghanaian farmers on dynamic agroforestry with the support of the Swiss government. And in Côte d'Ivoire, Gala working with co-ops in agroforestry. So in conclusion, the challenges for a sustainable cocoa sector are very significant, as we all know. Companies do take their own responsibility in contributing to change. The progress of the Initiatives for Sustainable Cocoa in other countries has shown that the Initiatives for Sustainable Cocoa can act as an important forum to increase focus and participation of a wider number of companies and government on cocoa sustainability. And that has been a positive outcome of these Initiatives for Sustainable Cocoa. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, John, for an interesting presentation. I was wondering, you mentioned that deforestation regulations might have an impact on the cocoa, on deforestation in the cocoa producing countries. What about the other EU proposal for a directive on human rights and environmental due diligence legislation? Do you have any thoughts on that from a fair trade perspective?
Yeah, Fairtrade's advocated. Yes, Fairtrade has advocated. In fact, it's another example of collective action advocating for human rights and environmental due diligence. We've joined together with Mondelez, Mars, Tony, Ferrero, Hershey's, Unilever, Rainforest Alliance, Voice, the civil society grouping on sustainable cocoa, and Fairtrade Advocacy Office, recognizing the need for human rights and environmental due diligence regulation at a European level. European Union level. Recently, Fairtrade published a letter to policymakers from over 270 producer organisations supported by 40 businesses, asking for the current directive under discussion at the European Commission to extend due diligence obligation over the entire supply chain, and it would apply to all companies, promote collaboration and cost sharing, deterring cut and run, and requiring companies to review when necessary adjust their purchasing and trading practices. Specifically, also, we think the HREDD regulation needs to mention living income and living wage. And as I said earlier, these are preconditions to accessing human rights, as well as being human rights within themselves.
Yes, valid point. And in Norway, our legislation, the Transparency Act, actually does mention living income and living wages explicitly. So that that's an interesting element that we get a lot of questions about that here at the moment. But what about, you mentioned that there has been a rise in income in Côte d'Ivoire that you've seen through the household income survey. But can you say something about the producing countries' ability to well, both adopt legislation, but also monitor farmers' income and livelihoods? Can we see an improvement?
I mean, what we see from the producing countries in terms of legislation was clearly their effort to increase the amount of income going to cocoa farmers through their living income differential and mandatory $400 per ton on top of the market price. But as I was saying, they recently announced this just hasn't worked in terms of getting to the benefits that they hope to for cocoa farmers, and that benefit has been eroded by a decrease in the overall market price. I think in terms of moving on from where they are, the governments have called for an economic pact for sustainable cocoa between the European Union and Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, and we support that call, as many others do. They've been very clear that you can't address environmental sustainability, social sustainability without addressing economic sustainability. And farmers' income, of course, is at the heart of economic sustainability. I think one of the things the sector can do, and one of the things that the ISCOs have been, the Initiatives for Sustainable Cocoa, have been very good in doing in terms of shifting the dialogue, is focusing on the need for a living income. I believe that we need to see many more supply chains issuing reports on the progress of farmer household income in their supply chain. And that's from our own experience. We first did this in 2000, started measuring in 2016, 17, and released the first data in 2018. And it was that gave us the shock that we needed to increase the fair trade minimum price and premium. When, I mean, we knew, you could see visually, and we've done research before about household income, but once you actually measure it against the level of a living income, it really brings home to you the need for progress.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's a very valid point. And also, I mean, we have projects in this region. If Ethical Trade Norway has a cashew nut cashew sector project, and just the availability of data, reliable data, is really also a challenge. So, but thank you very much, John, for your presentation. Very interesting, and I think it is really a good backdrop for us when we when we're going to hear more about how a multi-stakeholder initiative can address some of these challenges, and has been for some time already. So, Beate, if you're ready, I'll pass the word on to you.
Yes, I'm sharing my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so good morning to everybody, and thank you for inviting me to this important meeting. I would like to present you a bit what GISCO is doing. First of all, yeah, it was mentioned already at the beginning, we have our 10th anniversary this year. And here I would like to show you the timeline, what we have been doing within this 10 years. We started 2012 with the creation of GISCO. That was still a network in that time. In 2014, GISCO was founded as an association with 66 members in that time. And already in 2014, we started with a collaboration with our main partner country, which is Côte d'Ivoire. So with a letter of intent for collaboration. And in 2015, we started our joint project with Côte d'Ivoire. That is a project Pro Planteurs. Maybe many of you heard about it already. It's quite an interesting and quite a big project we do together with Côte d'Ivoire. From the beginning, GISCO has been very high on the political agenda in Germany. So you see the photos here of some of our ministers in those times. And in 2017, we had already the first visit to our project from our Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development in those years, Mr. Gerd Müller. And in 2018 already started the collaboration among the ISCOs with the first memorandum of understanding with a Swiss platform on sustainable cocoa. And in that year, we had in Germany the fourth World Cocoa Conference in Berlin, which also gave a lot of attention to the situation in cocoa and the problems and challenges in cocoa. 2019 has been also a very important year of us, because there we started really with an holistic approach within GISCO, and in our members meeting in that year, we had a resolution on our new objectives and an holistic definition on sustainable cocoa. I will come back to that later on. Then in 2020, we started the second phase of Pro Planteurs. It was not clear at the beginning that we go into a second phase. So that was an extension to the project to at least 10 years of activities. End of 2020 and beginning of 2021, we signed the Memorandum of Understanding with the other ISCOs, which are members of the ISCOs at the moment, that is Beyond Chocolate and DISCO. And also in 2021, we started with our first joint monitoring, which is also, I think, quite a success. And that in this year with Beyond Chocolate, and then in 22, DISCO joined, and this year we are doing the joint monitoring together with DISCO, Beyond Chocolate, and GISCO. I will come back to that also. And also in 21-22, we started with ISCO working groups on our six most important subjects. And within these working groups, we included also, which is maybe a bit different to the national working groups we have at GISCO, we included members from the producing countries and not only from the government side or civil society, and also farmers. So we have there really a good discussion also with the participants from the producing countries. So this is a kind of overview what happened in those 10 years of GISCO. Here you see who are our members. Most of our members are coming from the cocoa, chocolate and confectionery industry. We have 46 members from these member groups. We have 7 members from the German retail and grocery trade. 19 members from civil society. Civil society is really very strong in GISCO. And from public sector, we have 2 ministries which count as 1 member, which is the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture and the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. And we have several supporting members, maybe one of, I mentioned one of those, the International Cocoa Initiative, which is very active not only in GISCO, but in all of the other ISCOs as well. Here you see how GISCO is working. Since we are an association, our main decision body is the general meeting, which happens 1 a year. So there all important decisions are made with all our members in this meeting. Then we have an executive board, which board meetings, we have 4 meetings a year. And what is interesting here, we have in our board an equal distribution among our 4 member groups, which you have seen before. So every member groups has 2 board members. And that does not relate to the contribution of funding from the different member groups. So also civil society, which is contributing not very much funding to GISCO, has the same votes and the same rights in our board. And I think that was a quite wise decision at the beginning when GISCO was created. We have several working groups at GISCO level, or 3 main working groups. This is one working group with regard to pro-planteurs, which allows all the different members which are funding pro-planteurs to take part in the progress of the project, to give recommendations for the decisions which are taken, and so on. We have one working group on, we call it on sustainability, which reflects the strategy of GISCO and which takes up the most important issues where we want to have changes. And we have one working group on communication and events. Normally those working group meetings take place 4 times a year, and we have several ad hoc working groups or sub-working groups, for example, especially in the working group sustainability, where we have a working group on human rights, and in the working group on communications, for example, at the moment we have a working group to set up our event in October for our 10 years anniversary. The association is financed through mandatory and voluntary membership dues based on a membership dues schedule. We have around €500, which we have each year out of those membership dues. Most part is coming from industry. 2/3 of the membership of this financing is coming from the industry, 1/3 from the retailers, and a small part from civil society. Governments do not pay membership dues, but we have a quite important contribution also from BMZ, which supports studies and some specific activities we are implementing at GISCO level. This is our staff. We are quite small actually at the GISCO Secretariat. What is interesting here, we have one of our staff members is in Côte d'Ivoire, which is Elvis Correa, and he is coordinating also our GISCO members in Côte d'Ivoire and supporting the project ProPlanteur. I mentioned already that in 2019, after a long discussion among our member groups, we agreed on this GISCO definition, which is quite a holistic definition. And already here we mentioned that we are working towards a sustainable cocoa sector by enabling a living income for cocoa farmers, preserving natural resources, and especially ensuring human rights, that they should be respected along the value chain, and eliminating child labor. And based on this definition, we revised our goals in 2019, and we we identified new specific goals at that time. And here I have a selection, not all the 12 one, but what was important there and which were new elements in our goals were that we had included goals on improvement on farm gate prices, minimum prices, and premium systems with regard to reaching a living income. We had a new goal on agroforestry systems, which I think is really very important to really combat the climate change. And we included the application of hazardous and unauthorized pesticides, which should be ended. And a new goal was also on ending deforestation. Child labor was already included before. And new was also the goal with regards to the compliance with human rights and align with the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, also with regard to human rights and environmental aspects, and that all actors in the cocoa chain organized under GISCO have to implement that. Here, a chart where you see how we are organized, which are our strategic elements. We have 4 strategic elements. The first one is joint impacts and results orientation on site, that means in the producing countries. The second one is international partnerships and dialogue. The third one, member services, international and external communication. So we do a lot on bringing our members together, information management, events, and so on. And the last one, drive implementation of GISCO goals and make progress visible. I would like to go through this strategic elements briefly. So within the first one, of course, there we have our project ProPlanteurs in Côte d'Ivoire, where the goal is that we would like to improve the living conditions of cocoa farming households by increasing the income towards a living income and by promoting balanced nutrition. At the moment, we collaborate with 30,000 farmer households. And what was new in the second phase, that we went into matching funds, so our members could propose projects which are aligned with the GISCO goals. And ProPlanteurs was contributing with a matching fund, 50%. And we just we are in the second round of the matching fund, and we hope that still this year we will have a third round of matching fund. Yeah, and this links all our members closer still to our GISCO goals. And we see here several of our members which are already implementing matching fund projects together with ProPlanteurs. But with regard to the joint impacts, we are also looking at the what are doing our members. So a lot of our members are implementing individual projects. For example, at the moment, 125 projects are implemented in cocoa producing countries, 94 of them in West Africa, 66 only in Cote d'Ivoire and 40 only in Ghana. And with these projects reached at least 1 million of cocoa farmers and their families. And altogether 25 cocoa producing countries are covered. Of course, we are also very interested what are the impacts of those projects, and all members have to report on the impacts of those projects within our new monitoring system, and especially for GISCO from this year on, the participation in our monitoring efforts is mandatory for all our members. With regard to the international collaboration and dialogue, which was mentioned already before, the ISCO movement really is very important. So the strategic collaboration among the national platforms on sustainable cocoa, beyond chocolate, GISCO and Swissco. And we hope that the French initiative on sustainable cocoa, which was founded last year in October, will join us soon, will join our memorandum of understanding. But additionally to this collaboration among the ISCOs, we are collaborating also with ICCO, with the World Cocoa Foundation, with IDH, and also especially with the European Commission, where it is especially a joint collaboration with the ISCOs and the European Commission. With regard to member services and communication, which is especially, it is an important strategic element for all our members, especially for the medium-sized and smaller members, which do not have access to so much information. So we publish every 2 months our member information, where every member gets will be informed what is going on in the cocoa sector, what is going on in Pro-planteurs, in Cote d'Ivoire, and what are doing the different members. We have a website, we have a LinkedIn profile with more than 1,000 followers. We are doing online seminars and events, and especially the online seminars we do, especially after the request of our members. So here you see several of the online seminars we did last year, also with a link to the recording of those online seminars. And the next one we do in September on price building mechanisms at global level and in the producing countries. With regard to the strategic element of driving implementation and make progress visible, so we are monitoring the share of cocoa, certified cocoa, which is containing in cocoa products sold in Germany. And you see here, we started monitoring this in 2011. Which is on the German market at total. We had 3%. In 2014, we started to monitoring it, especially for our GISCO members. Here, I must say that all GISCO members cover nearly 90% of the German market. So there is more or less 10 to 15%, which is not covered by our GISCO members. And here you see that we have been in 2020 already with 85% of share of certified cocoa. But I must say certification is important for GISCO, but since 2019, before we have been concentrated mainly on certification, but since 2019 we have a more holistic definition for sustainable cocoa, and it's goes much beyond certification, what we of course would like to reach in GISCO. Here you see also the distribution among the different standards. The biggest one is UTZ, and then we have Rainforest Alliance and Fairtrade and a big part is already 27% is already the independent verified programs of member companies, which are also counted into this statistic. Important for us is also the GISCO roadmap we developed and agreed with our member in our this year member meeting. And this is a kind of overarching framework for GISCO, which is concentrating on our main themes, which is living income, deforestation, child labor, traceability, and certified and independently verified cocoa. And this framework relates objectives, target indicators, and the recommendations for actions to our members. And based on this GISCO roadmap, we also agreed this year in our member meeting that every member has to develop an individual roadmap and has to report publicly on that, which contains individual commitments and milestones with regard to those 5 main areas, and also the progress which members are doing. Members have to report every year publicly on that. So we are starting with that this year. And what I mentioned already is our joint ISCO monitoring system. I think that is one of our main achievements we have. And this system is based on common indicators, which we developed among Beyond Chocolate, GISCO and Swissco. And the first monitoring round was carried out in 2021. We developed an online tool, and the second monitoring started this year in April. And this one we are doing now together also with GISCO, and we hope that next year, hopefully, Swissco is also joining in this joint effort. At the end, I would like to strengthen still a bit more what we are doing in the collaboration of the national platforms for sustainable cocoa, and hopefully if NISCO is created, they will join the ISCO initiative. And here the objectives of the collaboration which are stated in the Memorandum of Understanding, which are to bundle efforts for a sustainable cocoa value chain through collaborative action, specifically in the area of the 4 common challenges, to coordinate and align activities on the operational level and among working groups, to streamline the communication and engagement with multinational companies with membership in more than one initiative. So we have quite a lot of multinational companies which are members in several of our initiatives. And there was also a strong call from those companies to harmonize more and to especially harmonize the monitoring system, which we reached then to do. Since it's of course an effort for those companies to be members in all the different ISCOs, and of course they were not in the condition to do individual different reports in all the different initiatives. So we are happy that we could harmonize our approach there. The 4 common challenges you see here on the left side, which are contribute to a living income, halt cocoa-related deforestation and child labor, and enhanced transparency and traceability in the cocoa value chain. And I would like to announce our first ISCO conference, which will take place the 1st September this year, which is concentrating on living income. As John said before, the income question, farmers' income question, is a precondition to solve the other problems like child labor and deforestation. So we are really concentrating a lot on how to reach living income for cocoa farming households. Here, this chart is on our work streams we developed and the corresponding working groups on transparency, traceability, living income, forest, agroforestry, child labor, and the last one on monitoring and evaluation. And each of these working group is headed by different ISCOs. And here you see the different dates of the meetings of the working group, which you find also in our event calendar on the GISCO website, for example. And if you're interested to participate in one of those working groups, please let me know. So they are open to our members, but if a Nordic initiative is created and you would like to have a look into our working groups, I think there's no problem to participate. I was asked to inform also on the GISCO reporting. So we do accountability report every year, which is a report of our executive board to our members. And this is presented at the annual general members meeting. It's a yearly report, and that report is not public. It is only for our members because it contains also all the financial situation, financial data, and so on. We have every year a monitoring report, and here is a link to the 2020 report. The 2021 report will be published in September. We're planning this year first time an annual report, which is a combination of the accountability report and the monitoring report, which will be publicly available on our website. And from this year also, we are looking forward to the public reports of our members on their individual commitments. Here also some information on further material which we developed within GISCO, but also already together with the other ISCOs. I mentioned already the monitoring reports. Here you can have a look at the constitution of our association if you are interested to create an association. We developed a background paper on child labor, and also within the framework of implementation of human rights due diligence, we developed a guide to conducting risk analysis in cocoa producing countries together with Südwind, an NGO which is member of GISCO and very active in this area. Together with the ISCOs, we developed quite interesting material on traceability, a traceability brief on cocoa in West Africa. We developed case studies on cocoa traceability, case studies with our members. Here you find also the monitoring reports of Beyond Chocolate and of Swissco, and a brief overview of the ISCOs, kind of a 3-pager, what we are doing. You can find here also with this link, following this link. Yeah, that's it. That's my introduction, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Beate. It's really impressive everything you've done and are doing during these 10 years of existence. We have received some questions from the audience. Let's see. So there was one question about the share of certified cocoa. So 84%. And the question is, does it take into account possible double or triple certification of the same producers?
Yeah, we're trying to clean the data for that, but I cannot be sure that it is 100% cleaned, but we take that into account. But yeah, I cannot guarantee that it's 100% cleaned, yes. But I think it's more or less correct, this data.
Yeah.
We have a quite high share of chocolate products sold on the German market, which is certified. All the big discounters use certified cocoa 100% now. So I think it's more or less correct, yes.
So yeah, you've been aware of that.
Yes.
And another question to sort of on the lessons learned after 10 years, what would be your advice to a potential Nordic initiative based on your journey?
Yeah, I think I would really recommend to set up the Nordic initiative, and especially to start with a discussion among your actors in your countries. I think we had quite a strong learning process also for the small and medium companies which do not have access to, let's say, or do not have the capacities to participate in international fora and so on. So I think, yeah, I see there quite a strong learning process, and I think we reached really to get everybody on track and give them the possibility to interact, to put their questions and so on. And I think I would recommend, I think this discussion among your actors with your consumers maybe also will always bring you a lot of, let's say, successes and new insights and new learnings. So that would be my recommendation, to start with that and to join the ISCOs, because jointly we are stronger. I can see that in especially in our development of the ISCOs, that we are a more serious partner now with regard to other global actors, with regard to the multinational companies, with regard to the EU. Yeah, we have much more access, and especially with regard to the producing countries. Also, the producing countries take us more serious as ISCOs, and they told us we do not want to interact with each individual ISCO. We want to interact with US ISCOs. And so this is my recommendation. Try to involve all your actors in your countries, try to align them, and then join the ISCOs.
Thank you.
Yes.
And there's also one question on the impact of the projects. Have you been able to document or increased income as sort of a result?
Yeah, with regard to our project Pro Planteurs, yes, we have increased income with regard to increase in productivity and also increase in income with regard to specific. We have made a categorization of the farmers we are collaborating with, and specific groups profited more than others. A specific group which we have to pay more attention are the households headed by women. It's the most difficult group to reach impacts there, and that we identified, and there we will concentrate more in the future on that. So gender is an important issue which are dealing with in Pro Planteurs. With regard to the impacts of all our members, we are starting now the second round of monitoring. So from beginning of this year on, we will probably see impacts. So last year it was kind of baseline because it was the first time. And we are planning at the moment together with the producing countries to make a baseline study on the income within all our member projects in Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. But also this study will also give us first the baseline data, and we are planning to do this study every certain time frame. So we did not identify yet 3 years or 4 years or something. So that will also allow us to see especially the impact on income increases of households we are working with.
I see.
That is really challenging because we have to work with the same methodologies in the different projects to get the data and so on. So it's not easy actually. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just one last question. Going forward, what do you see as sort of the main challenge to enhance collaboration even more in a German context?
Yeah, in the German context, our main challenge now is to get all our members, let's say, really aligned to set up their commitments with regard to our 5 main areas, to set up their commitments, to report on their commitments. So that was quite a let's say, a difficult process already to get this agreement in our last member meetings. Now we, because everybody has to report now publicly, there is that is really a new dimension for them, that we have now activities which are mandatory. Up to now, everything was, let's say, voluntary. And that is quite an interesting challenge. And hopefully we will reach that at the same time maintaining our membership and not losing several members over this process. So that's our main challenge at the moment. But on the other hand, I think this is necessary to really to reach more impacts. So that was really clear among all of our members. We have to start now, after 10 years, we have to concentrate more on reaching impacts and documenting the impacts, monitoring the impacts, and we are setting the scene for this at the moment. These are our challenges for the next 10 years.
I see. So thank you very much, Beate. Very inspiring, and I think useful to know about what your journey has been. Thank you very much. So we'll move on in the program and hear from our last speaker, and that is Marcus Hartmann, who works for Mondelez International, a company that has been part and is part of several initiatives for sustainable cocoa. Marcus, are you with us?
I am here. I cannot start my camera or my video. It's been stopped by the host.
I'll stop mine. Maybe the host can allow you to share yours.
Ah, here we go. Now I have been approved by the host. Here I am. Hi, everyone. So let me share my screen. I will share my entire screen, as I understand that is needed. And here we go. And the question we've all been asking over the last 2 years, can you see my screen? I'm hoping so, because I'm not hearing any protest.
Yes, can see it.
Good, thank you. So hi everyone, as said, my name is Marcus. I'm the corporate and government affairs lead for Mondelez in the Nordics. That's our way of saying that I work with our external relations and communications and those kinds of issues. This topic of sustainably sourcing cocoa is of course very important to us. We are one of the largest sources of cocoa in the world. So this is an issue that is always top of our mind. Before we go into that, I will just set the Nordic scene. As many of you might not have heard the name Mondelez, but I think most of us based in the Nordics have heard about either Freya or Marabou, which is our 2 local brands. We have productions sites in Oslo and in Upplands Väsby outside of Stockholm. But we are of course then part of Mondelez globally and that organization. This is not about us, so I'll move on to so I started is giving also a little brief overview of our program for sustainably sourcing cocoa Life. It's actually celebrating 10 years, so we are sharing birthday apparently with the GISCO this year. It's a program. It's not just the marking on our products. It's a whole program which we use to support sustainability in cocoa. You can see some progress number here, but we, as I said, we are one of the world's leading chocolate makers. So we need to have a sustainable sourcing of cocoa. It's our most important ingredient, and we need to make sure that we can source this in a sustainable way right now and also going forward. The Cocoa Life program is our way of doing this, working on the ground in the countries where we source from. We are, of course, doing this together with other partners on site and globally. But we're seeing this as an important step. Since we are so big, we can make a great impact working together with the farmers, but also with other organizations, and relying that we can make an impact where it's mostly needed. Through this program, we're seeing that the farmers that are part of this are having increased earnings and also have a more sort of sustainable approach to the ways of producing cocoa. At this point, on a global scale, 75% of the cocoa we source come from the Cocoa Life programs. In the Nordics, it's 100% for the Marabou and Freya brands, and we are, of course, happy about that in Nordics. But we're seeing that the aim and the long-term goal for 2025 is that 100% of all the cocoa we source will come from this Cocoa Life program. By the end of 2021, we can see that we reached about 210,000 cocoa farmers in a little over 2,500 communities. And as I said, 75% is of our brands sourced from this program. And of course, we know that these changes takes time, but this sort of approach that we have, ranging from sort of mitigating risk around child labor, forced labor, up to sustainability, forest protections, and similar, we need this to help grow the communities. As I said, we're not doing this alone. We have partners. Some of these partners have been mentioned before, but we are, of course, very well aware that we cannot do this alone. We need coordination and cooperation between many different stakeholders to make sure that this progress is ongoing, going forward as well. Specific then on the ISCOs and the multi-stakeholders dialogue, as said, we are engaged in all 5 sustainability platforms that we have in the European Union right now: the FRISCO, GISCO, DISCO, SWISCO, and Beyond Chocolate. We support the work that is done through sort of being part of task forces and in different work streams, and also, of course, sharing the learnings that we gather from our Cocoa Life program, which is an important part of this. It's 3 main takeaways that we have from this work and this cooperation, and what we think and hope that we can achieve. And it's alignment and a supportive environment in these discussions, and of course a coordination within the sector. Because together we can sort of better define the change that we want to see and how to sort of provide input on best practice and guides and support in doing this. And also, of course, creating links between helpful partners and organizations, both within the ISCOs, but of course also in the countries where we are active. Advocate for right policies and political support, as we were talking about in the European Union. We're seeing now discussions on banning import from products that has been part of deforestation, but also the human rights due diligence, which we stand behind and support the implementation of that. As said, we've seen it in Norway already. It's gonna be in effect from July 1st. It's an important step for us. This is important changes that we fully support, and we're already doing this. We have a human rights due diligence report already published every year. In this work, we also need to understand how the efforts we do link to sort of other developments on a national level, and also is of course about communicating to consumers and stakeholders what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we can do it. Important parts again, sector coordination to make sure that we not duplicate and that we work together, but also make sure that we don't block each other's progress, and also be a better understanding of the responsibilities of the different actors and how that can be used to the best possible end results. And maybe small thing, but also share data and learning with each other, and make sure that what we learn is also shared to other stakeholders and other companies and other organizations. So way forward, we're now talking about seeing if we can do this on a Nordic perspective as well. As I said, how can we work this together forward? And the European Union and country legislations do create new requirements for all of us. And within this goes, we can sort of help each other and external stakeholders to understand and align on what to do and how to do it in the best possible way to make sure that the requirements of these new legislations are fulfilled by us. And again, also, I mean, simple things like coordinate workshops and webinars to understand regulations and how we can implement and how we can do this going forward. And keep on providing guidance and best practice examples with each other and support each other in the important work that we're doing. Very important is to also see what we are learning is that each of us working alone has limits, and it's hard for individual companies, individual organizations and others to make big promises on sustainability. It is, I mean, as you all know, a huge issue going forward, and we need to work together to make the biggest possible changes that we can within these areas. And I think that ISCO can sort of help to support and have a sort of realistic and informed debate around this, around the progress that we are actually making, but also what we have left to do, what steps we need to take to make sure that we reach the best possible results that we can, and hopefully be even more sustainable going forward. And also sort of have a basis in this to make sure that we move away from talking about sort of marketing individual products and what's on that, more sort of what can we do together, what's the ambitions and achievement that we can do together on this issue, because it's a bigger issue than individual companies, individual organizations, and definitely than individual projects. So I think that with that, it's important steps, and ISCO is an important tool and an important platform to keep on furthering the work that we do and work together and go into the future and make sure that we have do even more, because as I said, even if we have done much, there's still so much left to do to make sure that we have a sustainable value chain when it comes to cocoa sourcing and other commodities, of course. Keep it quick so we are on time. You can see my email. I'll put that in the chat box. I'll also share some links to the work that we're doing in the chat box, so you can read further and see the work that we are doing and what we can do going forward. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Marcus. There are some questions coming in, and let's see if we can answer some of them. There are a couple on the Cocoa Life program. What about wages, wage progress, income?
Over the last year, we've seen a plus 15% increased earnings in Ghana and a plus 33% in the Ivory Coast. So this is definitely part of the Cocoa Life program, making sure that they have a sustainable income as well. Also, a big part of the program is making sure that we broaden the income base for them. We all know that a lot of the cocoa plantations are very, very small operations. It's not, I mean, it's not big farms that they have, they're small. So we need to make sure that the whole household has a broader base for income than not only cocoa. Also, that big part of that is making sure that there's education for children and youth, so they can educate themselves and find maybe other forms of income. So it's not only focused on the cocoa side, but also sort of on the whole household income. I also saw quickly there's a chat question, third party auditing. I forgot to mention that. Yes, it's audited by Flowcert. I think it's a company that's well known to Fairtrade, and also by Ipsos in some parts. So it's a third-party auditing of this program, of course. And again, working together with a lot of partners is also a way to make sure that we have our eyes from the outside on the program.
So the partnership with Fairtrade is that they take part in the third-party auditing.
The Flowcert is auditing us.
Okay.
Flowcert is auditing the program.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, and we also are partnering with Fairtrade specifically in the UK. This is I'm not going to give you the full company story, but Cadbury is part of Mondelez, and Cocoa Life was initiated by Cadbury in the UK, and they partnered with Fairtrade in that work. So it's still a partner with us.
Mm. Yeah, there's a new question on the income. So how can you relate it to these earnings to living income or the poverty line? Are the earnings sort of, yeah, how far is it from being a living income?
I mean, I don't have all the details in front of me around this. I shared the link to the Cocoa Life website where you can find all the information related to this program. We are seeing that, I mean, we have as I said, 15% in Ghana, 33% in the Ivory Coast. We see some relative increases in the Cocoa Life household in the whole of West Africa, earning 11% more are earning a living income in 2021 compared to 2019, despite pandemics and inflation. And all this is also related to partly to the Cocoa Life program, but also, of course, we're paying all the premiums that are put in place by governments and similar. So we are working quite hard on this. So
when you get, there's another question on why doesn't Mondelez decide for 100% fair trade cocoa to have a larger impact, and that's also easier for consumers to understand?
Yeah, I mean,
what would be your answer to that?
That would be the easy way to do it, but I think that as being one of the world's largest sourcers of cocoa, we have a responsibility to do more than just buy certified cocoa. We need to work with the communities. We need to work in the countries, and as I said, it also goes beyond cocoa. I mean, in these countries, we know that the poverty in general is a big issue. So we need to strengthen the communities. We need to be on site and make sure that we can do a large impact. This is not, I mean, as I said, we are partnering with a lot of organizations, including Fairtrade, to make sure that the efforts that we do is also combined with other efforts. I mean, as I said, collaboration is the way forward, and I fully appreciate the fact that it is harder to explain to consumers, of course, but that's the work that we have to do to make sure that they understand. And also, as I said, I think working together in ISCOs and in other forums is a way to sort of try to, on a wider scale, as a whole business industry and all other parts, to do this together, to make sure that we see that there's a lot of different programs, both business driven, but also fair trade, Rainforest Alliance, similar, that are doing things. And if we combine this together, there's a way to do a better impact, a larger impact.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for that, and thank you for your presentation, Marcus. We're approaching the end of this webinar. So to wrap it up, I would just like to thank the presenters and thank you in the audience for joining. I can say that we have been up to 80 participants at the most today, and we're very happy to see that so many were interested in joining. So wrapping it up, the challenges within the cocoa sector remains, and we have a responsibility to act and not accept that millions of cocoa farmers still live in poverty. So I think that's the challenge that remains, and that we try to need to come up with solutions to address. And the multi-stakeholder perspective becomes relevant. We've heard several examples of why that is relevant, and we can be inspired by the journey that the German initiative has had during its 10 years of existence. And then we know that the Nordic market could benefit from more collaboration. We think that working together in the Nordic market is better, makes more sense than working in each individual market. And to find a way of collaboration that works for us, maybe a bit further away, even further away in the cocoa supply chain, but with potential for with a high demand for more sustainable products and a potential for good collaboration. So this was a first conversation, and as you might suspect, we will be back with a follow-up, but we don't ask for any commitment just yet. So it was really a first gathering to gather the potential participants and actors in a potential initiative, and we're very happy to see you today, and we'll be in touch. We will end off today with the last poll, just to see whether there is interest from today's audience to join us in exploring such a collaboration going forward. So again, we don't know who answers what, but I think knowing who was present today and getting the sense of the appetite to continuing the collaboration is important for us. So let's see what you reply. You have two options, yes or no, and as I said, no commitment at this point. Yes, and that is we were excited to see the result of this poll, and 89% would be interested in joining us in exploring what such a Nordic collaboration could look like. So on that note, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today, and we'll send out the presentations to the attendance list, and we'll be in touch with a follow-up activity for later this year. So thank you very much.